Jim, how are you?
I'm good. Yourself?
I'm good, surviving. Yes.
Been very busy, I should think.
Yes, as we all are, yes.
Well, anyway, thanks for making this little option available. It's nice to be able to get a chance to go through some of the issues of the statement, although I've obviously shaped it around the theme of this
Yes,
session.
yes. At least we have this footprint of RAC on in COP. It's always good. And actually today I received the final editorial revisions for the paper in Nature, Climate Action. So it's about, do the references in nature style and all that. And
Congratulations, terrific.
and that is done and over with. And
Well, that's a real achievement. That's lovely.
Yeah.
Very
That's
pleased.
good.
Well, that's our second piece in. We had one in Nature and one in this. Nature Climate Action seems terrific for what we do, so that's wonderful.
Let's see what we are going to do with the new statement.
Yes, that's going to be very interesting.
Yeah.
So, well, we'll have a good chat on the 26th about that.
Absolutely. Hello, Simona. How are you? Very nice to see you.
So, I'm really sorry. I'm jumping in. I was just testing the connection because we have the call in a few minutes. So
yeah.
Anyway, so I just wanted to say that this is a great initiative, and we look forward to seeing how the UN will jump on, Phoebe.
Yeah, let's see. Same here. I'm also going to write today to the Master of Peterhouse in order to have the work on the extension of the multidimensional index that you have developed. Any work we add in it under Cambridge.
It would be fantastic.
Yeah, and we put together an MOU on that, and we move forward.
I just wanted to, I'll jump off because I believe you wanted to talk more with Mr. Feig, but just to say that the question I have is on the multidimensional vulnerability index is whether we anchor it with Cambridge or with the University of Athens, whichever academic partner you want, but it could also be a network of partners. So it's up to you.
We can have both.
Okay. All right. So that's fine. So I just put myself a background. It's not going to be a PowerPoint kind of thing. It's an open conversation, correct?
Yes. I think all of us are having an open conversation. How about you, Jim? Are you?
No. I thought for 5 minutes, who wants a PowerPoint?
No. So we are that by PowerPoint. So that's what's happening in those meetings, So better to have an open conversation. So yeah. All right. Okay. I'll let you speak then, and I'll come back.
Yes, although we are adjusting just to make sure that the audio visual works, and
so you're in Belém, correct, Phoebe?
No, I'm back in Athens. I'm
already
back in Athens. Yes.
Okay.
Because it's too long.
Yes, it's always too long, and most of us would have gone to spend the entire time, but I think Brazil was different, considering all the global dynamics. So an interesting time to speak about the knowledge economy 2045.
Absolutely.
I'll refer primarily on the kind of multilateral organizations that would be needed for the implementation for the pursuit of this very interesting initiative. Just to anchor it into what we have and see how organizations could transform. So I think there is a colleague from UNFCCC who also wants to speak about diplomacy. I'll just refer to, and anyway, maybe a little bit of a background as to where the baselines stand, because we need to ensure that we carry the world with us in this initiative, the world as is, and with all its limitations and challenges.
Absolutely, absolutely. Masaba Fioni is the person who is leading the innovation hub of UNFCCC. He works at UNFCCC for many, many, many years, and we are collaborating with him as IFORIA Network, giving the scientific infrastructure for the systems approach for deep dive implementations into different countries to inform the NDCs, the nationally determined contributions. So not only he is an incredibly nice man, he's also very clever, very forward-looking, and is a perfect partner.
So Malik is joining as well, correct?
Yes, yes.
Okay, all right. So it's interesting. We are colleagues in the Scotia group, as you know. So yes. I actually, we work together on the Glasgow initiative. So that's where it has all started.
I know.
I'm sure you know the government of the UK and the government of the United States asked Malik at the time to put together a network to work on the Glasgow vision, which we did at the time. But then from there, we've tried a few other things. I think the main issue has always been that the global machinery is too slow. And, you know, big organizations change, they resist change, actually. That's what's happening. And obviously, the world is moving much faster. And I think this asymmetric capability is practically what stood in the way. But there is time to revive the work, so.
Yeah. And the idea is to revive a platform, given all of us are very involved in multilateral work, but also in real science. You know, we produce results that are science-based and they can be used to mobilize change on the ground. So we definitely need to find the most efficient platform to do that. So that's why
And I'll refer to that as well into my brief intervention. IDCA is actually a big addition to this conversation, considering what they are doing globally. And they also launch a global foundation right now on primarily knowledge, on closing the gap in access to knowledge and in access to compute. So I think it just happened. You were fantastic with extending the invitation because they have so much to share. So it's going to be very interesting what the chairman will say. So I'm just going to drop another message to make sure he's on. We spoke very late because he was there was a compute conference in St. Louis and he just spoke there. So he came from there back home in Washington, D.C., and we were texting around midnight. So, okay, let me just check to see if he's on, okay?
Okay, lovely. Thank you so much. Thank you.
So the big issues is accessibility to the data that gets produced. How widely it can actually be used.
Yes.
And I know you think about that. And the more sophisticated he gets, the more difficult it is for it to be actually utilised by the people who need it. That is a challenge.
Yes. Is the data, the usability of the data, you know, in what form is it made open access? the continuous updating and monitoring of the data, and then how this data is informing recommendations after it has been utilized by analysts. So scientists analyze data to produce evidence-based results that will produce recommendations that make sense and that are correct, and that they are also, the difficult part, it is to be endorsed by politicians and policymakers and all the other stakeholders, of course, because unless there is an endorsement, a data-driven, science-based result, if it's not endorsed, which means it is understood and it is considered to be useful, it will never be translated into results, into implementation.
Exactly so. It's the big challenge in many ways.
Yeah.
That and verification of data. So it's
Yes.
you can model things, but
Absolutely.
how does one build confidence it's right? That's the other one. If you're going to mount really big decisions on those.
Yes.
So that seems to me the two challenges.
Yes.
Apart from doing all the modeling, all that
Yes.
hard work. Are you aware of the $100 million grant to the MacArthur Foundation has just made to Sentinel? Yes, they've granted $100 million. There was a competitive process for an initiative that would make verifiable change at significant scale. And Sentinel are people who worked in Africa on training communities what to do when new infectious diseases develop. And they've now been granted this money to expand that out into other African countries, which seems
excellent.
Good. But
that's
sort. I mean, you can see the cost of working on the ground with people. That's the
of course. Of course. Of course. It is so difficult. It is so difficult to either begin to gather them around the same table. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, Phoebe.
Good morning. Very nice to see you all.
Once all the panelists are here, we can start.
Because
the session is already recording, yeah.
Okay, we are missing Masaba. Where is he?
I'm not sure. Let me try and find him.
Okay.
Do you want cameras off to start with, Phoebe?
I think all cameras on. It's better to have all cameras on.
I like it too.
Very nice to see you all.
Morning, nice to meet you.
Good morning.
Good morning. Okay. Sylvia, I think I will start just to be on time.
Okay.
And I'm sure Masaba will joining SAP.
Okay. Can we ask Dr. Malik to turn on his camera, then I can take a screenshot?
Yes, I think everybody should turn their camera on, please. Excellent. Okay, very nice. Hello, everybody.
Masamba is here.
Lovely. Another camera on then. Excellent. Let's go. Hello, everybody. I am excited to be back at the UNFCCC Climate Innovation Hub and be introducing our session on imagining governance, technology, and justice in a changing world. This session is focused on Knowledge Economy Transition 2045. This is inspired by our good colleague and friend, because we work with our friends always, Malik Talian, and a few other very important figures in the multilateral world trying to bring on the ground transformational capacity for our transition to a sustainable world. So this session is focused on this initiative on the knowledge economy transition as complementary narrative to the net zero 2050 pathway. The knowledge economy seeks to integrate climate action with wider structural transformation for the global economy, highlighting the role of data, continuous monitoring and assessment, co-design between science, technology, politics, policy, businesses and financial institutions and civil society, transition pathways, and then also looking at the fiscal and financial instruments that can finance the actual implementation on the ground of the transformations that are needed in order to get on a sustainable pathway. And of course, justice is a huge, important axis, because it does not only need to be an efficient solution pathway, but our transformation needs to be inclusive, just, and of course, one that sustains social cohesion. We will also talk about AI and technology as enablers of this transformation. And our idea of this panel was to bring together leading voices from academia, multilateral institutions, and civil society to outline the vision, but also the practical implementation mechanisms, the operationalization of the actual implementation of this transition. So I will now give the floor to Professor Malik Dalan in order to set the stage, in order to introduce the Knowledge Economy 2045 initiative that he's leading. And then we will have an open conversation between us. Malik, the floor is yours.
Excellencies, colleagues, and friends, we meet at a time when the surface of the international system will look intact, but the foundations are under strain. Trade continues, markets function, the institutions still convene us, and yet following the pandemic, we are living through a structural transition. Geopolitical blocks are hardening, trust in institutions is eroding, climate impacts are accelerating, Inequalities are deepening. Intergenerational confidence is broken, and artificial intelligence is amplifying every vulnerability. This is not just another crisis, it is a shift from one organizing logic of the world to another. The post-war system assumed that institutions like the UN, the Bretton Woods bodies, and the rules-based order would be seen as broadly legitimate. That legitimacy rested on a shared narrative about progress, a shared belief in certain economic models, and a basic level of civic knowledge and trust. Those conditions no longer hold. Today, many societies, especially in the global South, doubt that the existing architecture can protect their people, their environments, or their futures. We have a legitimacy problem before we have a policy problem. If we do not address that, no amount of technical climate design or financial engineering will be enough. We also face a quieter, deeper crisis, the capture of knowledge itself. Public understanding of climate, economics, and risk is increasingly shaped by concentrated wealth through media platforms and sponsored expertise whose business model depends on delay and confusion. We're not just in a data crisis, we are in a knowledge crisis. When knowledge is hijacked, democracy and multilateralism lose their bearings. If we want legitimacy, we must reclaim knowledge as a public good. The world we are moving into is defined by knowledge and data. Intangible assets, digital and computational infrastructure, planetary risk, and AI, a new layer of synthetic cognition. Yet our institutions still behave as if we live in a purely industrial, physical, territorial economy. We need a framework that recognizes knowledge as a core source of value, vulnerability as a core source of claims, and legitimacy as a core asset. This is what I mean when I speak about the knowledge economy transition. So KE2045 is not a finished blueprint or a new grand theory. It is an invitation to work together, like we are, over the next 20 years on 3 linked tasks. First, a new way to measure vulnerability and legitimacy so that climate and social risk trigger support and restructuring, not just endless negotiation. Second, a governance framework for knowledge and AI, an international AI stack so that data, compute, and AI systems serve as a global enablers, not new instruments of monopoly, disinformation, or exclusion. So we have it anchored in the rule of law for the knowing. And then a stand-up lab format like the one we have with the Innovation Hub that brings states, judges, regulators, young peoples, technocrats, economists, and so on into structured conversations about the rules of the emerging order, including how to design long-term stress-tested and even interest-free impact investment structures that reward resilience rather than short-term extraction. So if we can make progress on these 3, we will have begun to rebuild the foundations of legitimacy for this new age and to free public knowledge from private capture. So this framework cannot be written by the same centers of power that designed the old one. So countries like Brazil, Saudi Arabia, Nigeria, Indonesia, South Africa, and many others are no longer peripheral. So they are central to this energy to energy transitions, to demographic futures, to innovation, and to climate stability. Non-state actors like technology entrepreneurs must be partners in this mission, not just a conversation. So the global South, the vulnerable, must be co-authors of the next system, not just implementers. So KE2045 is deliberately designed as a space where the authorship can be exercised through joint metrics, joint governance, experiments, and joint institutional design. On a personal note, so civilization is held together not only by law and markets, but by conscience. In recent years, knowledge itself, not just data or statistic, but our shared sense of what is true, has been hijacked. In such a world, technocrats are not enough. Technocrats can design the scaffolding, but they cannot supply meaning. This is why, at times, institutions need what I will call prophetic voices, not in a religious sense, but voices that insist on conscience, on responsibility, and on the difference between what we can do and what we should do. If we design the next 20 years without the moral access, without some sense of shared responsibility and restraint, then any knowledge or AI-based order will reproduce the very injustices and instabilities we are trying to escape. So what are we asking? I'm not asking you today to endorse a fixed plan. I'm asking that we acknowledge the legitimacy crisis openly, that we accept the need for new frameworks for productivity, where knowledge is treated as a public good and not a private asset, so that we can flourish together. And that a small coalition of willing state and institutions and practitioners work with us to turn this vision into 3 practical elements by 2030. If by 2030 these are in place, a vulnerability and impact metric, a governance framework for knowledge and AI stack, and a collective legal and institutional foresight function, we will have done more for long-term stability than any single declaration could claim or report. We use the name KE2045 because rebuilding the foundations of a global order is a generational task. 2045 is not a prediction, it is a horizon. Roughly 1 generation in which to move from an exhausted industrial logic to a knowledge and legitimacy-centered one. 2030 is the real test of our seriousness. If we have not laid these foundations by then, 2045 will remain a slogan, not a pathway. The United Nations does not need another slogan. It needs Sherpas for the transition, for the knowledge transition, trusted guides to help move it from an industrial, state-centric order to a knowledge-based, legitimacy-centered one. KE 2045 is offered in that spirit. The world is changing, whether we act or not. We can continue to optimize inside a fading system, or we can begin carefully, collaboratively, experimentally, and honestly design the one that we will follow. KE 2045 is our invitation to you, to all of us, to do the latter. Thank you. Obrigado.
Thank you very much, Malik. A very comprehensive and invitation to our action statement, which you know very much that I fully support. I will quickly give an additional viewpoint that integrates explicitly with all that you said. And then our panel will engage in a discussion. So I want to bring 2 elements to the conversation. The first element is the work that I do as chair of the UN Global SDR, the Sustainable Development Report. This has been assigned by the UN General Secretary 3 months ago, and a group of scientists, an independent group of scientists, is working on that, and I'm honored to lead this work. And the mission of this report is to inform the high-level fora at the UN with regards to the progress in implementing the Sustainable Development Goals and UN Agenda 2030, and at the same time start the conversation of the future of the SDGs beyond 2030. It is an important report because it happens every 4 years, and this one is the last one before the 2030 is coming out in 2027. Now, very quickly, I want to say that I believe that the UN 2030 Agenda and the SDGs are a brilliant and comprehensive framework for transformation towards sustainable development, towards sustaining the interaction between nature, the engineering infrastructure systems and the socioeconomic systems on a pathway transforming our current non-sustainable development into one that can get the whole of the world on a sustainable pathway. This is what the SDGs are. And I call it a brilliant and comprehensive framework because it's a science-based framework, it's explicitly defined. Now we have ways to measure performance against the SDGs, and we have in our under our belt the science, the technology, the policies, and the financial resources, both in the public and private sector, in a blended mode to actually achieve them. However, we know that achievement of SDGs in terms of actual on-the-ground SDGs relevant performance is below 20%. Now, is it good enough? No, it's not good enough because we are 10 years into the implementation of the SDGs. We have another 5 years until 2030, which is the deadline. But if we look at the bright side of things, this is a very science hectic framework we have achieved to integrate it into policy frameworks across the globe, and we have achieved 20% of implementation. How are we going to get this acceleration towards implementing the rest of the 80%? Because we know this is a good framework for sustainable development. And here, I think the key challenge is lack of accountability within the global multilateral system, which is in itself in a state of crisis. And while the SDGs provide a direction, there is no explicit mechanism, instruments tasked with driving the implementation at scale. We need to accelerate implementation at scale, and my work under the Alliance of Excellence for Research and Innovation of IFORIA, which is a big research institution and research and innovation network that works on systems, innovations for the transformation to a sustainable interaction between nature, economy, and society. My work tells me that we need an explicit global commons where the data, the technologies, the modeling, availability, and the tools that provide recommendations are made available at a mode of being supported with training to each and every stakeholder, be it a state, a group of states, at subnational level, or any other stakeholder to get the information that is needed. So what I'm arguing here is that although we have a lot of science, a lot of technology, even financial resources in the public, but mainly in the private sector, we do not have that common global platform, which is completely open access, but it's also a truly open access. it doesn't just make available the data, and we have plethora of data nowadays with satellite data and drone data and in situ data and socioeconomic data, which makes available the modeling that is needed to get on a sustainable pathway in order to identify the solutions, and then the tools that help you to actually visualize the solutions. I'm saying that we need a global effort to streamline all of this and articulate them in 3 steps for each and every stakeholder. And I'm going to finish in 2 minutes. The first step is continuous assessment and monitoring through data-driven procedures that allow each and every country and each and every stakeholder to identify exactly where they are in terms of the implementation of the SDGs. Then we need a systems modeling approach that brings together the different systems that make up the economies and societies of countries, the climate system, the land use system, the energy system, the marine system, in order to identify explicit transformations. What needs to be done in each and every year in order to achieve implementation, scalable implementation on the ground of the SDGs? What are the technologies? What are the policies? What are the fiscal and financial instruments? And then this co-design of the pathways, and I call it co-design because it's not just a scientific process, it's also a process that brings in technology developers, politicians, policymakers, financiers, businesses, and the civil society, is also supported by fiscal and financial solutions. It's supported by a mechanism that brings together the multilateral financial institutions, but also private finances into a blended mode in co-financing these transition pathways. And of course, in all this process, you also need capacity. You need the stakeholders to have the capacity to understand what sustainable development means, to understand what a knowledge economy is, to understand that data-based, evidence-based, science-based, trust-based solution pathways are needed in order to streamline all the efforts, all the science, all the technology, all the finances in order to achieve implementation. And this kind of efforts need a lot of course, collaboration and trust. And if you don't have global collaboration and trust, you might achieve collaboration between the alliances of the committed and the willing. And it also needs a lot of science, but also a lot of technology and a lot of engagement with the different stakeholders. So we need to make explicit on a science-based mode to each different stakeholder in all parts of the world, why is it important? What do they gain by really having a knowledge-based economy that details the transition pathways, which will not be only designed by science and imposed to them, but it will be co-designed between science, technology, and all other stakeholders. And I'm closing by an initiative that we just launched with the European Parliament and the European Research Council. It was launched last week in Brussels, where we try to make the interface between science and technology and politics and politicians more vivid. So what we did, we launched an initiative that we cross-map a high-level European Research Council funded project. These are huge projects that are funded by European taxpayers' money with members of parliament in order to create these direct bridges between what science has to offer and what politicians and policymakers are trying to implement. So on that note, I will stop here and invite our esteemed guest. I want to go with a first quick round, asking each one of you for one key point in advance of our deeper conversation that refers to how you think we can govern knowledge, climate, including AI, nexus, over the next 20 years, and whether you can bring in one concrete idea, a metric, a pilot project, an institutional mechanism that allow us to understand better vulnerability in the economy, but could realistically help us advance through the efforts of UNFCCC Innovation Hub and also the efforts between your institutions. A very short answer from each one of you, and then I will also open the floor for your more lengthy interventions. So I would like to go quickly to Masaba Thioni, the person who actually led the Global Innovation Hub at UNFCCC for many years.
Thank you, Phoebe, and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you. Very pleased to have the opportunity to contribute to this very important session. So the future we need is a co-flourishing future, a future whereby human and non-human living radically collaborate, mutually enhancing one another's capability to thrive, not merely sustaining or even regenerating ecosystem, but also participating in a co-creative and reciprocal relationship that result in new vitality, values, and meaning. In particular, the core human needs should be satisfied for the many people, no one being left behind, while maintaining human activities within the planetary boundaries. The transition to such co-flourishing future necessitates a system change, a shift in the underlying dynamics of the Earth system, not just action on some technology or isolated sector or incremental improvement. It necessitates a psychologically mediated change of the structure and feedback loop of the socio-economical, ecological, technological system of the Earth, and a framework including knowledge economy, planetary intelligence, eco-augmentation, planetary coherence, and co-flourishing does exactly that knowledge economy shift value creation from physical capital to knowledge, innovation, information, and human capital to enhance productivity and competitiveness and achieve growth. Planetary intelligence enables the system to sense, learn, and steer across scale. Eco-augmentation rebuild and upgrade ecological systems, shifting biophysical feedbacks and planetary coherence, align institution, governance model, policies, financial instrument, business model, cooperative approach, product from the culture and creative industry, and technological system. And finally, co-flourishing supplies the motivational, cultural, and social foundation for longer-term stability. Innovation is the mechanism through which these 5 dynamics become operational. And one concrete example of implementation of such framework is the Senegal River Basin, where we are collaborating with Phoebe and her team on 3 main aspects to implement this framework. One is the development of a digital twin that will enable to simulate the behavior of the river with models that take into account all these different aspects that I have mentioned. A second aspect is to conduct ecosystem clinical trial to validate the model. And then finally, a co-flourishing diplomacy, which goes beyond the traditional diplomacy and link the economy of the 4 countries that are sharing these transboundary rivers among them and also with their ecosystem. I will stop there, and later on, if needed be, I can further elaborate. Back to you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Masaba. Indeed, this vision of a digital twin that integrates the natural system, the engineering system, but also the socioeconomic system, and allows you to simulate science-based, data-driven solution pathways for managing the commons. In this case, in Senegal, is 4 countries that have been traditionally fighting over common resources, and we do hope that this project will enhance their already proven ability to work together under an intergovernmental committee between the 4 different states and share sustainably their common wealth. Instead of the common resource being a source of fights and war, being a source of collaboration, being the true incentive for collaboration and co-flourishing in their countries and their communities. I find this one of the most amazing projects that we work on, and I am thankful to Masaba for integrating this us in this effort. Our next speaker is Dr. Simona Marinescu, Senior Advisor to the United Nations Economic Council of the International Data Center Authority, and one of these amazing scientists that have mobilized so many solutions at the UN level. And of course, working at an institution, the International Data Center Authority, who has a critical role in giving direction to the digital infrastructure industry on the global stage and ensuring climate safe and environmental friendly activities. Nowadays, in the era of AI and data centers, I would like her to come in and answer our first two questions. Actually, these questions were co-designed with Malik. So, Simona, can you respond to the initial questions, especially with an eye to the challenges that the digital industry is facing, and how the growing AI demand can reshape the potential of this industry into facilitating sensible implementation of the transformations that are needed for sustainability and knowledge economy. Simona, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Professor Kandouri. Thank you so much, Professor Dahlan, and good morning, good afternoon to the speakers. Just very briefly, I would like to thank Professor Dahlan for the invitation, and you, Phoebe, including me in this conversation. Scotia Group has advanced a series of very interesting ideas to reshape the multilateral system and the international law, so I'm happy to see the work continues with this new initiative. I would like to offer maybe a few ideas as to how this knowledge economy 2045 initiative could become a global blueprint as it intends to be. So first of all, it's commendable that we look into the future, the next 20 years, with so much hope. Indeed, that's what we definitely need, considering that we are in a perfect storm in which nothing really looks promising. And putting at the center of global diplomacy the concept of sharing and the concept of commons, which were intended to guide the 2030 agenda, but unfortunately we lost this particular commitment very early on into the SDGs. As you know, knowledge is the fundamental currency based on which the multilateral system operates. The multilateral system is meant to build national capacities, offering them access to knowledge, and ideally to actionable knowledge. If we talk about knowledge economy, we definitely look into knowledge that has applicability and that has market value, and that could take progress moving forward to a world that is less challenged than the world we have today. Unfortunately, into the use of knowledge, what is happening is that we have a series of breaks into the global machinery. So first of all, the use of knowledge is not binding in the development of international law, and use of knowledge is usually trumped by what is politically acceptable. So even making access to knowledge to all countries, we need to agree that what ultimately prevails is what is for them acceptable in terms of their culture, of their context, and what is affordable. So the resource aspect is also important to factor in. But we are having this conversation at the time we are about to close the SDGs. Phoebe, you mentioned that you look into the progress report. You lead actually the development of the progress report, transitioning into another 15-year agenda, because that's how the multilateral system operates, from the Millennium Development Goals to the SDGs and to the post-SDGs. And the transition is made through the Pact for the Future, which ideally and surprisingly and promisingly mirrors a part of the knowledge economy 2045 that Scotia plus RAND Europe put forward. So we are at the time the organization is transitioning towards a new set of goals. Whatever progress is made on the SDGs, the new agenda will look different, considering precisely the challenges that were mentioned, the emergence of technologies, the emergence of artificial intelligence, and the risks that they pose to the world to become even more unequal than already is. So I believe that the knowledge economy 2045 provides a framework for the next 15 years and primarily for the operationalization of the Pact for the Future. The Pact for the Future was the very first time the member states agreed to sit at the table to practically reopen Article 109 of the Charter. The Pact for the Future mirrors totally the Charter, and it does put at its heart two important components of the Knowledge Economy 2045, one which is the emergence of digital technology and the need for a digital compact, and the second is the importance of youth into taking humanity forward, which is also in the knowledge economy factored as one way to empower the real players, the local authorities through municipalities and the youth. So if the Knowledge Economy 2045, using the structure that is put forward, provides an implementation framework for the Pact for the Future, that's where we should be. And as you know, Professor Kanduri, in the development of the SDGs, there was a research network that was put forward, the Sustainable Development Solutions Network. That's how it came into being, understanding the importance of science, the importance of high quality, validated, actionable knowledge to develop the SDGs. Now, maybe that's the time when those networks, your network, Professor Kanduri, Scotia and RAND would come together to be that platform of science and knowledge to put forward the new blueprint. And let me just say that there is no doubt and there is no question on our belief that science and technology are the main drivers into progress. We had an analysis of how much SDGs depend on technology and science at some point. And we realized that practically those are indispensable drivers to see progress. The same logic will apply to the next 15 years. And again, this concept of a covenant rather than operating on targets that have created so much fatigue and so much disappointment and frustration, and the fight, the disruption in global diplomacy that targets have brought in. Because looking at targets, countries, of course, look into their pockets to see if resources are available. And because there are no resources to reach the targets, there is a lot of pressure, including at COP30, on multilateralism to deliver more. So to your last point on the importance of artificial intelligence and knowledge that is technology powered, knowledge as a common good. I'm sure the chairman of the International Data Center Authority will come in with some very concrete elements to consider. Let me just say that the closing the gap on access to such resources has become even more complicated. What the Knowledge Economy 2045 would need to consider is that we start with very low baselines. Out of the massive investment that goes into resources, least developed countries received over the last 4 years, as the World Investment Report of UNCTAD, on which I worked, says, received only 3%. Those countries will still need to be able to access those global resources under the principles of the Knowledge Economy 2045. This is where we are. There is one major interest when it comes to least developed countries is to source their critical minerals and build knowledge and technology capacity somewhere else. So I think every 15 years of the United Nations starts with a series of challenges, but this time around, considering that on top of everything else of disease, of poverty, of conflict that is still happening, climate change, we have the technology challenge. This is a totally new world towards which we need to walk with a very logical, strong framework and functional diplomacy. Co-flourishing diplomacy is a great concept. We look forward to it. Just as a participant to almost all of the COPs, I need to say that if you go to a COP, you realize how challenged the world is. The first pavilion, the first part of the COP setting is with innovation, with science, with the great progress that the real world is making. And then you walk into the negotiation rooms where there is really a depressing moment to realize how much it takes for every single line into international diplomacy to come on a broad agreement. So I'll come back for other questions, but thank you so very much. And I wish good luck with all the efforts on this agenda. I'm sure the chairman has much more to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Simona. You always have this amazing way of bringing everything together into a way forward. And it's important. But I have this burning question before I go to the chairman and CEO of International Data Center. Knowledge economy principles should underline our way forward. But do you suggest abandoning the framework of SDGs?
Definitely not, because the SDGs provide, the SDGs are a test. Every 15-year agenda is a test in many ways. Are we capable of reaching, this ideal world in which there is no poverty, there is no gender inequality, there is no access issue to water and other natural resources? Absolutely not. There is one thing that always happens, which is setting the right filters. We can achieve the SDGs in many ways, or we can make progress on SDGs in many ways, but we want to make progress that is more sustainable. We want to make progress that would allow our children to also see a future on the planet. So we were unable at the time. And Phoebe, science was on the table when we designed the SDGs. I mentioned that.
I know.
But the negotiations, what is politically acceptable is always the problem. The fact that knowledge and science are on the screen, we have it, we know it, but it does not translate in what we accept, talks about the hypocrisy of international diplomacy, to be very honest. So the same leaders agreeing in New York or in Belém or wherever else, when they go home, realize that the country has different needs and different levels of acceptability. So such an overhaul of international diplomacy is necessary. And this initiative puts some very good ideas on the table.
Absolutely. And different capacities of understanding and implementing. So it's a lot about the capacity. I'm very honored to have the chairman and CEO of the International Data Center Authority with us, Mehdi. I'm terrible in pronouncing his name, but I'm going to do it. Mehdi Parayavi. Yeah, yes. I hope it's good enough. And I really want your angle on all these transformation efforts, and particularly with regards to our capacity for scalable implementation of the transformation. How are we going to make this magic happen to get all this knowledge that we have into scalable, implementable, well-funded projects that will support the welfare of the nations?
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm honored. You raised a very important question, and Dr. Simona addressed it. I think diplomacy and politics and science don't necessarily share values. And I think because we're entering the realm of artificial intelligence and data-driven economies, this might be our first and last chance to actually do something tangible about the environment and creating equality and justice around the world. And I'll tell you how that could be possible. If you asked me 4 years ago, I would tell you that in a lot of world regions and countries, it's impossible to build huge data center or data-driven capacities because the population densities don't justify for the presence of such infrastructure. However, because of AI, location is irrelevant now. data now follows energy and human capital, which all of a sudden opens a global opportunity for nations and regions who have never seen a slim light of hope for having an equitable and just ecosystem where they can actually compete in a healthy manner with the rest of the world and create better economies and better lives for their citizens. Now, for us to achieve that, and the big tech, believe it or not, and global politics can follow this because they follow currency and they follow money, and data is the new gold. And there is big scarcities around the world, both on the human capital side and on the energy side. What we need to make sure that to prevent is to make sure that new colonialism does not occur, where the big players go to small countries or countries that are kind of deprived from having a global perspective, to make sure that their energies and the resources are overutilized and their economies are underdeveloped. For this to happen, we need to have some context. There is a lot of environmental pushback on the data center community. And there is this perception that data centers are impacting the world's environment and climate in a negative way. I want to share with you some statistics where over 40% of world's data centers reside in the United States. And the US generates 171 cubic tons of CO2 for every $1 million of GDP, whereas the world average is 343. China and India are 708 and 722. And a country like France with over 65% of nuclear is sitting at 105. What this number tells us and indicates is that data centers, which today consume about 0.5% of the world's grid, they actually help decrease the world's emission by a few percentage points. Why? Because they don't run to serve themselves, they run to make other industries more efficient. So the cost of producing data and the cost of performing functions across industry verticals basically drops environmentally when you have a more intelligent economy. Therefore, having a more data-driven and a more transition towards digital foundations of an economy that works based on automation actually reduces the environmental impacts and helps elevate the climate efforts in terms of improving our numbers. And if we can get our facts right, then we can actually have a serious conversation. Because as you can see, even people who oppose environment and climate today, they are in a global AI race, and they want to build more data centers around the world. So why don't we use this huge rush, this wave, to our benefit to help the environment? Why don't we help countries who have never had a chance to have a say on this global stage to actually have a chance? And I personally believe that this is probably the last time we as human beings can make our own decisions, because by 2045, I think AI will make decisions for us. So if we actually sit down and put our brains together and actually put our passion and commitment and drive into perspective, using the right data, using the right context, actually have hands-on, tangible, implementable milestones that are not just narratives, but actually actionable items, and we all agree on delivering, and somehow merging our climate goals with the needs of the big tech and the global politics so that everybody aligns. Some people might align because of environment and justice, and some might do it for money. But irrelevant to that, everybody actually agrees on one thing, and we actually can push an agenda. Thank you.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I mean, the consistency of what you said with what I am thinking and working on 30 years is incredible. Without data centers, without scientists to analyze this data, we are at a loss, because we cannot articulate the way forward and we cannot convince those that take decisions. We cannot guide them and convince them of where the benefits are lying. And a lot of the benefits are about making money. A lot of the benefits, especially if you get into the space of beyond GDP and you monetize natural resource ecosystem services and you include them in the decisions, it becomes very apparent that it is beneficial to have this systems approach for transformation and facilitated by technology, by AI, and always data-driven. You can increase the pie and distribute the pie more fairly. And you can actually, through that data-driven science process and these flourishing interactions with all the stakeholders in the diplomacy era, you can actually de-risk projects that are interesting opportunities but have very high risk, especially in the global south. So you can mobilize also private resources, not only multilateral financial resources for these projects. So I totally agree, and this vision, it's I think the only vision that it can really scale results. And the general AI issue, AI becoming able not just to connect information, but to produce its own information and decisions is another big issue that has to be on the policy agenda very soon, because we are not discussing that. There is no single regulation on general AI at the moment. I'm very happy to also introduce my good friend and Professor Jean Falk, Professorial Fellow at the School of Geography, Earth and Atmospheric Sciences at the University of Melbourne, Emeritus Professor of the School of Humanities and Social Inquiry at the University of Wollongong in Australia, and most importantly, and the director, the head of RAC, this is the Regional Action Climate Change initiative that meets every year at the STS Forum, the Science Technology Society Forum in Japan. I'm very honored to be a member of RAC. And I think it produces very interesting work with regards to mobilizing this sustainability transition, this knowledge-based transition to solving our problem. Jim, the floor is yours.
Thanks very much, Phoebe. And of course, we've been invited to imagine a deep structural shift in the global economy in which knowledge, data, innovation, and inclusive institutions become the core infrastructure of a just transition. I thought it might be useful to focus on one of the problems it must address, and in this case, the vital issue of food security under climate change. And to assist, I can draw on the RAC consensus statement this formed in Kyoto last month. And the basics, of course, are widely known. Hundreds of millions of people live with high levels of acute food insecurity. More than 2 billion, almost 1/3 of humanity, experience moderate or severe levels of food insecurity already. And rising atmospheric CO2 amplifies this, disrupts rainfall, intensifies extremes, degrades soils, warms and acidifies oceans, and exacerbates shocks in already fragile regions. The food system, unfortunately, powers this, contributing 1/3 of anthropogenic carbon emissions now, rising to perhaps 40% by 2050 unless we reverse the direction. The world actually produces enough food to feed 10 billion people now, but more than 30% of that's wasted. regenerative agriculture could reshape food production into a net carbon sink, but it's barely deployed. And the problem is not simply biophysical, but one of knowledge, finance, technology, and power. And whilst physics couples climate and water change tightly together, roughly 40% of the world's population live in watersheds already exposed to water scarcity. Others face flood and drought in seemingly random oscillations. So a just transition is required, and the knowledge economy has a central role to play. So let's think about how. Increasingly, water productivity of agriculture is a key. We need integrated data on rainfall, groundwater, soils and crops, locally grounded modelling of future climate scenarios, and decision support systems that are accessible to farmers, local authorities and cooperatives. And that requires knowledge infrastructure, sensors, open data, climate services and extension systems that translate science into choices about seeds, planting dates, irrigation, much else in the face of emerging risks. So digital tools, including AI and digital twins, which I know Phoebe's very involved in modelling, help anticipate risk and test interventions. In food systems, this includes stress testing policies with models of basins, supply chains, and coastal zones. To name just a few, it means using AI tools to integrate dispersed data from sensors, satellites, markets, climate models, and local observations into early warnings that reach large and small landholders, commercial and artisanal fishers, urban poor, in time for them to act. So we need a transition that makes this kind of capability an accessible public good, which is indeed at the heart of KE2045. Early warning and anticipatory action systems need to be linked to finance. Even if people know that a drought or flood is coming, they need resources to act, and that requires international finance mechanisms that respond to knowledge about risk instead of treating loss and damage as a surprise every time it happens. It's a governance as well as a technical challenge, and that seems to lie within this agenda too. Effective food and climate policy depends on the protection and regeneration of ecosystems, forests, mangroves, coastal fisheries and soils, and a knowledge economy approach is central. Shared platforms, transparent data, local participation, a need to monitor deforestation, soil carbon, fisheries, health and biodiversity, decisions about restorative interventions and how to compensate communities hinge on legal, social and technical knowledge brought together, and obviously not just on carbon metrics. So the bottom line is applicable knowledge, which must ultimately be co-produced with potential users, whether they be farmers, Indigenous peoples, women's organisation or local governments. And I know KE24 speaks directly to this. The old approach of data and AI controlled in the north and applied to the south will fail, but one that builds capabilities in the global south, supports regional research networks, gives communities control over how information about them is used, can strengthen multilateralism rather than hollow it out. Brazil actually is well placed to lead. It sits at the intersection of major food exports, the Amazon rainforest, pervasive social inequalities, and strong scientific and civil society communities. And potentially a Brazilian-led COP that links net zero 2050 to KE 2045 could show how a country can simultaneously tackle deforestation, support family farming, invest in public digital infrastructure, and champion fairer rules for global finance and data governance. So I guess the message from this is that energy hardware alone will certainly not solve the growing threat to food security. Rather, we need a knowledge economy transition, building the institutions, technologies, and financial systems that can turn climate science and local experience into timely, just, and effective action.
That was a a very, inclusive, holistic message. And indeed, this is the message. This is the knowledge economy that we need to include the data, the science, the technology, the local communities into pathways for climate actions that correspond to challenges of all the systems. I would like to thank you so much, Jim. That was really inspiring and a beautiful communication of the RAC statement 2025. I would like to close this session by inviting the person who inspired the session, Professor Malik Dakhlan, to just give us 1 or 2 minutes closing remarks, or the way forward based on the knowledge economy initiative.
Professor Kanduri, thank you very much. I think this session, I have faith in, actually, after having it, that it actually did exactly that, what we needed to do. And it put the narrative in a proper context. And I thank Professor Falk for ending it exactly with the note that it is okay for us to move from a 2050 energy transition move to say that we've become more precise rather than granular by saying it's actually 2045. And we need to be more focused in our expectations and how we look at our vulnerabilities. 5 years will make all the difference in the way we look at things, including as we think of the UN celebrating itself at 100. It does not need to end with absolute calamity. So I'm trusting Professor Masamba to help us synthesize this, and perhaps with a communique to get this into focus with the COP team to understand what this means. A small anecdote before I let you go, and I'm cognizant of the time. The world that's in operation, that is dismissing all of the narratives and the metrics and the unbelievable work that humanity has done together to collaborate and plan, is being dismissed continuously right now through technocrats. You may have listened to the recent visit from the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia to the United States, visiting with President Trump. Now, the highlight of that meeting, in terms of what we, as far as we're concerned, is the fact that there was an actual confirmation of an investment of $1 trillion into the US economy. And this is not narrative, this is not rhetoric, this is $1 trillion that will be invested predominantly in the AI sector and every aspect of what that means. Money that will be probably paid for by China, invested into the United States. Now, 2.5% of that is $250 billion. If we're not able to come up with some metrics that accommodate for different things in the next 10 years with this kind of money, it seems to me we have missed the boat in terms of what we need to do. Brazil is literally at the heart of what that means, what that says, what that needs to do. I hope that we can gain inspiration from you and from your thoughts and how we should do things. I would go as far as saying that in a time of crisis, like in the experience with the neoliberal economic theory, formed by Hayek and Milton Friedman, as they were trying to conceive of the world in the intra-war era, they formulated the Mount Parallel society in terms of continuously thinking and considering some of the priorities that needs to happen. We won't have the answers right now, but the fact that there is a generalized awareness of what needs to happen to re-engineer the purpose of much of the work that has been done by all of us. It's not a point of shame or guilt. It's just we have the tools now to know what we need to do to get it done and not be invalidated or dismissed. So it's okay to readopt a new narrative. Thank you very much, Phoebe. I'm going to hand it back to you and the amazing work that you've done, and anything we can do to support and push the agenda And I see Dr. Marnuska's hand is up, so I will leave it at that.
Simona, quickly, because we
very
have
quickly,
to
very
close.
quickly, very quickly. I
Yes.
just, obviously the closing word came from Professor Dahlan. I just wanted to say that the International Data Center Authority assists countries in redesigning their economy to center on knowledge and technology. It's a very innovative concept, and they work all over the world. A good complement to the work that you're doing, which I thought would be important to share, and also the global foundation that they established, that soon will sit at the ECOSOC, working on digital skills, on education primarily, closing gaps wherever they exist, and making people relevant to the new economy, but also working on digital financing instruments, primarily on digital economy bonds, and on its own fund to support the transformation. So we look forward in any ways to be able to complement your work with some very practical solutions, and also with lessons that would inform this new, very innovative agenda, the Knowledge Economy 2045. And again, much gratitude for having been included in the conversation. Thank you.
Absolutely. Everybody's needed in this transformation. And the good news is that we know what we need to do, and we have the data, the science, and the tools to do it. Let's engage everybody. Thank you very much, everybody. And apologies for the plus 10 minutes that we took from the program of the UNFCCC Innovation Hub. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.